I watched the film Four Communities Tackled the Child Equality Gap. The biggest significant issue that the film addresses is the issue of the equality gap in education for people in poverty and trying to close that gap. And this issue is significant because closing this gap, giving equal opportunity to these students, will break the cycle of poverty in their families and give those students more opportunity, and also give more Americans in poverty those opportunities. Most schooling populations that will be affected, like they talked about in the film, would be schools that do not have the good funding, like the one in the film. It didn't have good funding as much as its counterpart school on the east side, so a lot more people didn't have as much opportunity to go to college, as well as they were stopped in going to college almost because they weren't looking for the qualities of people in that school. They were looking for qualities of stuff they didn't even offer at that school. And then one myth it didn't directly address, but it gave insight to, was the myth of people in poverty being lazy. As you watch the documentary, you can see that all these kids want more for themselves than what their parents had. And if proper supports are in place like they are in the film, they choose to not take those paths that those parents did before them. They choose to go to college, they choose to get a better job, they choose to so on and so forth to make sure that they do well. And when referring back to the article that we've read before, The Myth of Culture of Poverty, it gives information on the myths of poverty and how they're not true. This relates to the film I watched because they address these issues of people and the notions they hear and choose to believe about poverty. So in the film, they go through and they talk to some kids on the other side of town that are not in the poverty and ask what they kind of think, what kind of is happening, what's the difference. And they didn't even realize it until after they had a meeting where they saw the teachers and principals talking from the other school about it. And it kind of was eye-opening to them, and I thought that was a good similarity between that article and the film. And in the other article that we read, what is rural blah 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 blah, what is rural America? It gives us 5 different indicators. In that article, number of students living in the districts, percentages of those students living in poverty, percentage of students of color, educational spending per student, and high school graduation rate that show concentrated poverty. And in the film, you can see each of these indicators in place throughout the different schools they show that are going through poverty and stuff. And I thought that was very interesting that it kind of, you can see these once you see an example. Like, it's not just showing you that, yeah, these could be why there's concentrated poverty. No, these are the actual reasons why there are concentrated poverty in these areas. In the third article I was going to talk about is the understanding cultural diversity in learning, and how it talks about trying to teach students we may not understand. And when talking about students and being able to relate to them, it might be harder for some people who have not been through poverty, who've not been in those different things, different situations. It'd be hard for us to relate to those children. And that relates back to the film, talking about the nursery program that they had in the film, which was a big program that gives these students different role models as teachers. So, like, they may have different cultural backgrounds, they'll have different races, to be role models and help match backgrounds for the students that are coming in, to help them feel more comfortable to learn, to move on, to not feel as bullied like they might in a public school. And the big point of view was, this film was to inform people on the conditions that poverty has on youth in schools, as well as how to fix that problem, or if not even fix the problem, but help improve the problem that we have with that equality gap between more schools that have more funding versus schools that don't have as much funding, as well as schools with a higher poverty rate than those who do not. And this film corresponds to everything I've learned from other sources. But I believe that this film went into more detail on ways to fix or improve the poverty gap in education, whereas the other ones are just kind of telling us, hey, this is here, but not really telling us ways to improve it, whereas this film did. And that is my film analysis.